Hello from San Diego, my friends. I am here for a Presbyterian Youth Workers gathering. So I'm excited to spend time with other people who work with children and youth throughout the country in the PCUSA and to learn from them. And so far, it's been fabulous. In the recent days, I've been thinking a lot about how there are people in my life who feel that they are not allowed to not know when it comes to the Bible and when it comes to God, who feel that to not understand what's going on is to doubt or to somehow be on the outs with God or is somehow sinful. And I come from a place where that used to be true for me. I was raised in a bit of a high control denomination where asking questions or not understanding was equated with doubt, and doubt was equated with sin. And so if there were things that I did not understand from what we had learned in church or from what I had read in the Bible, I was just supposed to take it at face value and not let myself wonder about it or question it too much, or else I would be seen as not being faithful. And God might even be mad at me. So I wanted to address that because it's just simply not true. I love what Paul Tillich, he's a theologian, has to say about the fact that faith can't even exist without doubt, that the two go hand in hand. But we have biblical proof for this when we look at the disciples who all throughout Jesus' earthly ministry were the closest people on earth to Jesus and yet never had any clue what was going on. And when Jesus tells his parables to the masses, the disciples will come to him afterwards and say, "What did any of that even mean?" And Jesus always answers them. And so I want to encourage all of you to feel and know in your hearts that it's okay to ask even Jesus, to say, what does any of this even mean? What is happening? What is going on? And to also know that even as you're asking questions, that you don't have to do it alone. You can go to God, you can go to others. The disciples were never afraid to sit in front of their friends and say, "I don't know what's happening." They would talk amongst themselves, and sometimes I think they built each other up in faith, and sometimes they got it completely wrong. There was a time when Jesus had been talking about not trusting the yeast of the religious teachers who were not producing anything good, and all of a sudden the disciples were talking about bread amongst themselves, and Jesus came over and said, "Why are you talking about bread? That is not what I meant at all." And then goes on to explain what he had been talking about. But even when we talk amongst ourselves, and even when, as a collective, we don't know what's going on, it is good for us to come together and admit when we don't know. God can continue to use that and come to us and help us to find the answers. So please never feel that you have to have all of the answers, especially as parents, especially as guardians, because your children are going to come to you with their questions that they are not ashamed or embarrassed to ask. And sometimes we don't know the answer. I listened to a podcast where they say that the most powerful words that you can say to a child or youth are, "I don't know, let's find out together." Be willing to say, "I don't have all the answers, but we can look into this a little bit more together," and to know that we will never know all of the answers, and to know that sometimes we may think that we have been inspired and gotten a right answer, and that will change over time. To just continue to stand in that posture of humility and curiosity, and to let the answers come to us through our conversations with one another, through reading the Bible, through being in church, through listening to podcasts, through any of the most incredibly bizarre sources that you never thought you would hear God through. God can speak to us when we stand in humility and are ready to have the truth proclaimed to us by God. But we can only do it when we ask. Ask and it shall be given. It can only come when we are willing to admit that we don't know all the answers, and that's okay. Have a blessed week, and I'll see you all soon.